no military planes or any other equipment to the Iraqi government until boom, boom, boom. Don't say we're not a party to this. We are a party to this. We were a party to stopping the slaughter in Benghazi. We never promised that we would. We're a party to this because, number one, we promised, and number two, because we're the United States of America.
And once again, you see that the issue transcends party loyalties, party obligations, party history. This is a remarkably, in a Congress where people don't talk to each other, this is an unbelievably bipartisan issue. Our next speaker, because he has to answer to the bell, always, is Congressman Sherman, again from California. This is also a California issue. Maybe you should have the California legislature pass something. But he is the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation, and Trade, and serves in the House Financial Services Committee, which would give you lots of levers to use on lots of bills. Congressman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. It's an honor to be here with this distinguished panel and to follow Governor Ed Rendell and to be here on an issue that unites John Bolton and Howard Dean. And it is good to be with so many advocates for democracy in Iran. With me here is my foreign policy advisor, Siamak Kurdistani. And if you give him your card or your email address, we'll keep you up to date on what's going on in the Foreign Affairs Committee on the issue of Iran and, of course, Camp Ashraf. U.S. troops left Iraq after a 9-year presence. However, we still have a responsibility there, and that is for the residents of Camp Ashraf. The human rights tragedy may be unfolding there, and this should be a priority for our bilateral relationship with Iraq. Secretary Clinton announced an agreement between the government of Iraq and the United Nations on December 2011 on the temporary relocation of MEK members at Camp Ashraf, and she stressed this resettlement must also have the full support of the camp's residents. Clearly, in the way that this agreement is being carried out, it does not have that support. Part of the agreement involved a movement of residents to Camp Liberty near Baghdad. Unfortunately, the government of Iraq has relatively low credibility on this issue, having countenanced the violence against the residents of the camp in recent years. And we know that President Maliki is under pressure or cajoling from the Ayatollahs who run Tehran to not act in good faith. We promised the people of Camp Ashraf that we would protect them from any harm. We should do just that. We have 1,000 women, many children. We have people who have been disarmed by America, and now they are at the tender mercies of the politics of the Middle East. We promise to protect them, and that we should do. The area allocated to Camp Liberty has been reduced. We've heard about the concrete walls. This doesn't sound like a refugee camp. It sounds like a forcible relocation to a prison camp, and that's simply wrong. Will the people of Camp Ashraf, if located to Camp Liberty, be allowed to have access to lawyers, to their families? What is the purpose of these relocation plans? And why, most importantly, can't the United Nations staff be allowed to interview residents in Camp Ashraf right now? It sounds like the government of Iraq is cooperating with the regime in Tehran to tighten the noose around the People's Mujahideen of Iran. In April 2011, Iraqi forces entered Camp Ashraf, and a violent raid began. 30 residents were killed, 300 wounded. And I had a chance to confront the Iraqi ambassador, and he said, well, the blood isn't really on the hands of his government. It's partially on my government, our government, the American government, because the State Department continues to list the MEK as a, quote, terrorist group, and accordingly, Iraq feels that a lower standard of human rights respect is in order. The solution to this is obvious. The court has seen it. Governor Riddell has seen it as well. I am the lead sponsor of, the lead Democratic sponsor. I want to give credit to Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who is the principal sponsor of House Resolution 231. We introduced it early last year. And it calls for all necessary steps to support the commitments of the United States to ensure the physical protection of the Camp Ashraf residents. Similar provisions were included in the Iran Threat Reduction Act, an act I helped write and helped pass on the floor December of last year. The House approves bill makes it the policy of the U.S. government to urge Iraq to uphold its commitments to ensure continuing the well-being of those residents of Camp Ashraf, to prevent involuntary return to Iran, and not to close Camp Ashraf until the United Nations Commission for Refugees can complete its process, recognize as political refugees the Camp Ashraf residents who do not wish to return to Iran, and that, of course, is all the Camp Ashraf residents. To protect the people of Ashraf, the State Department must work with the United Nations and Iraq for a written protocol. There must be a written protocol that establishes the resettlement of Ashraf residents, guarantees of their safety by the UN, U.S., and Iraqi government, without such a clear written agreement, relocating residents to Camp Liberty is a recipe for a human rights catastrophe, similar to what we saw in April 2011. Iraq has an awful lot of oil. It produced $38 billion with the most per year, with the most recent statistics, more now, and yet the United States is still generously providing $2 billion in aid. I don't think we can provide aid to a country that is ignoring its human rights responsibilities. The listing by the State Department is a problem that makes it difficult to provide, to find political asylum for the residents of Camp Ashraf. It encourages Iraq to feel that it does not have to respect human rights. And this designation was not initially reached on the merits. It was done as part of a plan to build goodwill, harmony, and love between Washington and Tehran. How's that working out? And that is why I'm glad to see the court involved and insist that the decision be made based on the facts and the merits and not on some harebrained scheme of misguided diplomats who think that by listing the MEK on the list, they'll somehow create a kumbaya regime in Tehran. At our Foreign Affairs Committee in March of 2011, I pressed Secretary Clinton directly to personally review that court decision. Later that year, I pressed the Secretary to protect the residents of Camp Ashraf. I am still waiting for the State Department. The court is still waiting for the State Department. And it is time for the State Department to do its job. I look forward to the day when the residents of Camp Ashraf live in security and peace, but I especially look forward to the day when they live as full participants in a free, safe, and democratic Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. That was wonderful. Let me just make one interjection before I take us to our next speaker. I am a female trying to make her way in the world. So was Secretary Clinton. And she's been a quite, I think, effective Secretary of State. But we do think back to the earlier Clinton administration when we did not take timely action on Rwanda. And the Democrats then said it was a great shame, never again. We didn't intervene in Bosnia as early as we should have, and only did so after Srebrenica. So as, again, a Hollywood film cinematographer might say, we have seen this movie before, and the Democrats, as with the Republicans, have every reason in the world to prevent yet another chapter of embarrassment, moral embarrassment, by allowing a predictable slaughter to happen. We know how this is going to end, and I guess the seventh floor is waiting for that, to pick up the pieces afterwards. Our next speaker is an old pal of mine from long, long ago, Louis Freeh, who had a really enormously chiaroscuro career. He began as an FBI agent, undercover, trying to pretend he wasn't a Phoebe, even though he looks the part, as a pretend mobster of some sort, and then made the transition, which had never really been done before, to being an AUSA in the Southern District of New York, where he came to head the organized crime unit, did the Pizza Connection case. And then when people were looking around for a new FBI director, my old friend Phil Hyman noticed that the two Venn diagrams coincided of a really good trial lawyer and somebody who'd have real credibility inside the institution, having lived the life of an agent. And it was Louis Freeh. And he did a bang-up job as director. In between, I forgot to mention he became a judge. And now he's just retired and serving the general public weal in his consulting firm. But he really is a tough-minded law enforcement official who has no motive, incentive, or purpose to give anything other than the unvarnished truth. So, General Freeh.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Murthy, ladies and gentlemen, my distinguished panel members, it's a great privilege to be here with you this afternoon. I want to thank you all for your support and your leadership and the moral courage, and particularly the leadership we've seen from the active members of the Congress who've been here with us today. Former members, friends up here, colleagues, Senator D'Amato, Governor Rendell, and I have become very close friends over the last year. You know, I've spent many days in hearing rooms like this, usually sitting in front of the panel answering questions. When I was leaving Washington after 8 years, my staff said, we did a statistic and you've testified more than any other head of a federal agency, because I reported to 2 intelligence committees, 2 justice committees, 2 appropriation committees, and anybody else who wanted to call me up here. So I have a lot of experience as a witness, and that's what we are functioning as today. We are functioning mostly as witnesses. The people who have come to this cause, have you heard, an absolutely incredibly diverse group of people. I don't think I know of another cause that would have coalesced and brought together this amazing group of people. We wrote a letter to the Secretary of State on January 20th. It's public now, you can see it. The signatories on that letter are absolutely incredible. Attorney generals, CIA directors, NATO commanders, Marine Corps commandants, senators, governors, ambassadors, national security advisors. and we all have come to one single